Welcome to Bankless, where we explore the frontier of internet money and internet finance. And today, on this episode of our Zuzalu series, we are exploring some new frontiers in new technologies, all of which are poised to completely revolutionize the world and change everything about the operating system that society is currently running. Speaking of operating systems that are about to change, that guide society, Bankless Nation, today we are exploring the frontier of crypto in Africa, perhaps the first continent that is poised to leapfrog its way into a new operating system that we call Web3, that we call crypto. What can crypto do for Africa? What can Africa do for crypto? The conversation of crypto in Africa is extremely rich and should get anyone in crypto looking for real adoption, real utility, very excited. Developing countries have the ability to leapfrog technology. For example, landlines never made it to Africa. The entire continent just skipped to cell phones. And the same thing is playing out in crypto. The banks never win to service Africans. But nonetheless, Africans are finding utility and access using bankless technologies, using Ethereum. There are two conversations here in this episode. One is about crypto adoption in Africa and why Africa is such a primed continent to accept and adopt crypto protocols. And then another about an African network state project, going deep down into the reasons for why a network state in the first place, and tying it to the deep cultural bonds that tie all Africans together no matter where they live in the greater globe. Both of these conversations gave me goosebumps, simply out of excitement and satisfaction of the adoption of crypto protocols in the way that they were always meant to be, to uplift individuals and coordinate communities. We're first going to hear from Yoseph Ayele, who's working on building a borderless Africa using Web3, of course. He started a venture fund to invest in African Web3 development and adoption because he thinks, and also gives the arguments for, why Web3 will see its first billion users out of Africa. The needs that Africa has as a whole are things that Web3 provides. Financial stability and access, of course, but also identity services and credit facilities. Yosef does a great job painting this picture of Africa's trajectory to leapfrog its way to becoming a dominant player in the Web3 landscape. After Yosef, we have Eche Emole, one of the founders of Afropolitan, a very ambitious network state project looking to build an Afro-centric digital nation. This conversation spans both crypto and network states and adds its own spin onto the Balajian idea of a network state, one with Afropolitan hubs that exist wherever the African diaspora finds itself. Both of these guests are amazingly articulate and relentlessly optimistic, two things that makes my job so fun and enjoyable as a conversation moderator. And these were probably two of my favorite episodes that I recorded at Zuzalu, so that's why I'm sure that you're going to enjoy it as well. So let's get right into this conversation of crypto in Africa. But first, a moment to talk about some of these fantastic sponsors that make the show possible. Kraken Pro has easily become the best crypto trading platform in the industry. The place I use to check the charts and the crypto prices, even when I'm not looking to place a trade. On Kraken Pro, you'll have access to advanced charting tools, real-time market data, and lightning-fast trade execution, all inside their spiffy new modular interface. Kraken's new customizable modular layout lets you tailor your trading experience to suit your needs. Pick and choose your favorite modules and place them anywhere you want in your screen. With Kraken Pro, you have that power. Whether you are a seasoned pro or just starting out, join thousands of traders who trust Kraken Pro for their crypto trading needs. Visit pro.kraken.com to get started today. You know Uniswap, it's the world's largest decentralized exchange with over $1.4 trillion in trading volume. You know this because we talk about it endlessly on Bankless. It's Uniswap, but Uniswap is becoming so much more. Uniswap Labs just released the Uniswap mobile wallet for iOS, the newest, easiest way to trade tokens on the go. With a Uniswap wallet, you can easily create or import a new wallet, buy crypto on any available exchange with your debit card with extremely low fiat on-ramp fees, and you can seamlessly swap on Mainnet, Polygon, Arbitrum, and Optimism. On the Uniswap mobile wallet, you can store and display your beautiful NFTs, and you can also explore Web3 with the in-app search features, market leaderboards, and price charts, or use Wallet Connect to connect to any Web3 application. So you can now go directly to DeFi with the Uniswap mobile wallet. Safe, simple custody from the most trusted team in DeFi. Download the Uniswap wallet today on iOS. There's a link in the show notes. Bankless Nation, I'm here with Yoseph Ayele. Yeah?
Yes.
Beautiful.
You got it.
And we're going to talk about crypto in Africa and why there's such a large opportunity for the Web3 industry, the crypto industry in Africa. Yoseph, welcome to Bankless.
Thanks so much for having me.
First off, how has your Zuzalu experience been?
It's been amazing. Amazing humans, great connections. I thought I came here to do work, but then spent a lot of time just building really good relationships and having a good time.
What did you come to Zuzalu to do?
To meet folks who are interested in the African continent. Came here for EdCon as well.
Right.
So I give a talk there, share my thesis on the continent, and also to be part of some of the network state discussions and really understand where people are thinking about.
You said the word thesis, which means I'm interested. You have a thesis on a continent.
Yes.
What does it mean to have a thesis on a continent?
Just a framework and a way for the rest of the world to connect with the African continent. I feel like there's a lot of crypto activities happening in the African ecosystems, but most of the Ethereum community, as well as just the broader crypto communities, just don't understand what's happening there. Many people haven't traveled there. A lot of African builders don't get to come to places like this. So being a bridge and helping provide a framework.
Yeah, there's, I'm assuming, just a very large divide between Africa crypto and the rest of the crypto industry.
Yes.
I think there's also a very large divide between East and West in crypto.
Yes.
But even that divide commingles a lot.
Yes.
Like the Chinese, which is part of crypto, which is very large,
Yeah.
does mingle a lot. I mean, there's been a large Chinese cohort of people here as Uzalu. Would you say like the African side of crypto is even more cut off between East and West?
Way more cut off.
Way more cut off.
Way more cut off, because the biggest barrier for a lot of African builders is that it's hard for them to travel to where global crypto communities are and where main events are. So the number one issue is just visas. The West and many Eastern countries just don't give Africans visas. I was organizing a whole side event around Africa at DEF CON in Colombia, and basically everyone who was supposed to come participate in it couldn't make it because they couldn't get a visa to Colombia or couldn't get a visa to transit through the US. So that's just one of the biggest barriers that creates the physical divide.
Yeah, so the cross-pollination of it just doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think there's going to be two parts to this conversation. It's what can crypto do for Africa, and then maybe we'll talk about what Africa can do for crypto.
Yes.
We'll talk about the cross-pollination here.
Awesome.
But let's start with that. Let's start with why does Africa need crypto so much? Like, why is Africa primed to be a crypto continent?
Because centralized entities have failed us. That's the main point. A lot of centralized government, centralized banks, institutions are either not effective or non-existent. So that's where I think decentralization makes the most sense, is it acts as the layer of trust on which so many economic, social, political, and financial institutions can be built on. And when you go to places where there's, some areas are way more developed, but a whole lot of areas are just so not developed so far, I think the core infrastructures of crypto, from money and payments and trust and coordination, all those things make so much more sense there.
Would you say that another way of saying that is institutions have
Yes.
not just provided structure in
Yes.
Africa, and that's what you mean by centralization? Is there's just
Exactly.
not trusted, centralized places of organization
Yes.
that has provided social scaffolding for the African continent?
Let me give you just a few examples.
Sure.
So there are 14 African countries that were colonized by France. When the French were kind of leaving in the 1960s, they instituted this currency called the CFA. It stands for Colonies of Africa, French Colonies of Africa. And that's pegged to the franc, and now pegged to the euro. What that means is 50% of all the income those countries get goes to the French treasury directly. So you don't own your money. It goes to the French treasury.
Is it fair to say that was a tool of maintaining
I would say so.
colonialization?
Exactly.
Yeah. Even though France wanted to get out of the continent physically, but they were like, we'll leave our currency and maintain value extraction that way.
Correct. And also they don't, the French government created some boundaries of your interest rates and how much money you can print and all of that. So those governments, you can say that they don't control their own currency, their own monetary policy. So here in the Western world, we talk about sovereignty from governments. In those countries, the governments don't have sovereignty over their own states and their own monetary policies. So that's one use case where, for example, the Central African Republic recently made Bitcoin a legal tender. That's not because they're Bitcoin maxis or whatever. It's out of desperation. They have no control over their own monetary policy. Right. Therefore, it's easier to say, hey, why don't we just jump into a whole new monetary policy that's inherently global?
Right. So the idea is okay, if we're going to use somebody else's money, perhaps we should use one that is based on the internet and not benefiting some particular power elsewhere, and
Yeah.
let's just use the one that's found on the internet. Well, you will use Bitcoin because its monetary policy is going to be better than the French monetary policy.
Exactly.
And so like it's maybe they still don't the African countries don't have control over the monetary policy, but at least it's not the French. It's Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has all the properties of Bitcoin that we know and enjoy.
Now, that's not to say that that's the ultimate goal and answer. I think some level of sovereignty is amazing, right?
Sure.
But it's kind of an example of where some of those countries, it's just 14 countries out of 54, are basically struggling to get sovereignty over themselves. Another sort of macro example is that there are 54 African countries. Only 40 countries print their own money in their own countries. So they're outsourced that to European printing press, and they pay 6% of the total money supply as printing fees and transportation costs. So just imagine a ship.
Who charges that?
There are three companies in Europe, in France, in the UK, and Germany that basically act as the printing press for the fiat.
They charge a service for access to the printing press?
Of course.
So they get inflation and they get to charge fees?
Yes.
I can see why there's demand for something else.
Yeah. And even at a very practical, those are like examples at a macro level, just at a human level, like the internet has been a big game changer for many people. When I was growing up in Ethiopia, the internet opened the world to me. I learned most of my English online. It opened up a lot of access to information and connectivity, which is amazing. But the internet is still very gated to Africans. That was gated. That was many years ago, and still gated because if you don't have a means to transact and pay and receive money, then you cannot access the best of the internet. If you cannot set up a PayPal account and use that to receive money for the work that you do, then how can you say you're actually accessing the best of the internet? So even remote workers in many African countries are using crypto as a means to get paid for the work that they do.
So what you're saying is that the internet is a massively democratizing force that has benefited the world as a whole, including Africa. But then there's this more that as the internet matured, it evolved and adapted and became what you're calling permissioned, as in like parts of the internet are paywalled by whatever you would do, like subscribe to Bankless, you use a credit card. We do accept crypto, but also you can also subscribe to anything that you would subscribe, pay for on Amazon or pay for any sort of credit card. You're saying that was not available to most of Africa because most of Africans they're not connected on the payment rails.
And today is still the case. So you might even have the level of connectivity, but for example, in Nigeria, banks have a limit of $20 a month that you can spend internationally with your bank card. So even though you have the connectivity, the lack of foreign currency creates these really low ceilings for people to actually participate online and in the digital world.
So as much as great as the internet is, it simply just means less for Africa.
And that's because, again, it goes back to centralized institutions. Even in tech, centralized technology institutions are still gated. And some of it is just structural, right? So how those countries' economies are structured or the relationship between that economy and global economies. We pay $5 to $10 billion a year on SWIFT fees alone. That's a massive cost. If I'm trying to send you money from one country to the next country, the money goes through Europe, the US, blah, blah, makes a big route around the world and comes next door. And then I pay like around 10% of what I'm sending you in just fees.
Routing fees
to get it all around. So that's so inefficient. It's blocking any type of development and progress when you're basically relying on global institutions that are not designed for your needs.
Interesting. So a bank transfer in Africa that goes to a different African country routes through like Europe banking rails. And a bunch of middlemen up there charge a bunch of fees, and then down to a different African country that's very, very proximate to the originator, but it just goes through Europe first.
And most transactions are low in numbers. So the percentage
high in volume, low in numbers.
High in volumes, low in numbers. So the percentage that you pay for the transaction cost,
it's a flat fee.
Yeah, it's so high as a result of it.
Okay, so these are all money and fee and banking system use cases, which makes total sense to me. Does it end there?
No.
Or where does this go next?
So Africa has 1.4 billion people. 500 million don't even have any form of ID.
Okay.
So that's a big friction point. to participate in anything in the world. So that trust, identity, reputation, those are really critical areas where I believe blockchain technologies can have a real impact. And that's actually when I talk to different African governments, those are areas they're really interested in. How do we create shared consensus-based truth? What is true? Who owns this land? Who owns that land? Knowing, like, having a verifiable form of property rights, that's one of the biggest areas where you go to truth is consensus based, then we're always in negotiation of what truth is. That creates a lot of friction to actually build, really sophisticated economies on top of those.
I would imagine some of these problems are symbiotic with each other. It's weird to call a problem symbiotic, but like in the negative direction.
Yeah.
As in, like, perhaps it's harder to produce a financial system and banking rails in Africa because there's no identity.
Yes.
And then also it's harder to produce identity when, like,
Yes.
such a core part of identity is like your bank account
Yes.
and your nation state ID.
Yes.
And you're saying, like, there's neither in Africa.
Well, I wouldn't say nothing exists.
There's less.
It's just there's a lot less of it. It's not sophisticated. It's not fully developed, right? So, for example, when you look at payments, some African countries have way more advanced payment systems than the U.S. You go to Kenya, for example, we have M-Pesa there, which is a mobile money company. It works so well everywhere, including remote villages. Doesn't need internet. When you have internet, it can get sophisticated. Basically, your phone number is your bank account. It's your means of paying salaries or receiving income. It's your KYC. It works so well, in that country. It's heavily centralized, but it's functional. But when you're trying to do business cross borders, then that's where it becomes challenging. When you're trying to get any form of credit, then that's where you reach a ceiling. Because those layers of trust and reputation and even credit scoring are not as effective, are not as efficient. So you see some things that are way more developed, but a whole lot of things that are not as developed.
Right. Okay. So I have so many more questions, but
Sure.
I first want to make sure that does it end there, or so we have banking and money.
Yep.
We have identity.
Yep.
Are there other use cases that we need to talk about
Yes.
like what's okay? Oh
Yes.
boy, it keeps on going.
Yeah, no, I mean so the other area is actually the art, creative spaces. So there's like African art and African culture is all over the world. You see it in music, you see it in art, you see it in food. The world is consuming African creatives. But very little value is captured by the people who are creating that, right? So I'm seeing so many artists getting into the NFT world and even experimenting with that medium that wouldn't be possible in traditional art of just painting something, So that's one movement that's happening.
Okay, so I think the picture that you're painting is that there are no good monies. There are few good monies in Africa.
Yes.
And the crypto monies that we've invented, as troublesome and chaotic as they are, still present very valid options for Africans.
Yes.
Not only that, but stablecoins, I'm sure, are very, very relevant.
They're massive.
Right.
It's easier to access stablecoins in so many countries than accessing fiat dollars, especially US dollar stablecoins.
Sure.
To give you an example, where I come from, Ethiopia, there's the bank rate and then there's unofficial rate.
Of course, yeah.
There's
Also
100%. There's 100% premium. 100% premium on
twice.
the bank rate twice. So
call it the corruption rate,
or the free market rate.
Right.
That's what I call it. So there's the controlled bank rate.
Right.
And that's because and there's a lot more money being transacted outside of the bank rate than outside of it than within the system.
Right.
Right. That's because there's so many layers. It's hard to kind of go through every aspect of it, but it's systemic. Sure. And I don't know if there's a pathway for the governments to find a way out of that.
Right.
Right. So basically, people are transacting outside of that system. If I'm running a small shop and I need to buy inventory, let's say I'm selling shirts and I need to import a whole lot of shirts from India. How do I pay the $1,000 to actually order that? This is hard to go through the existing process.
Right.
Yeah, I might try to use MoneyGram or Western Union, but I'm going to pay ridiculous fees, long processes, and all of that. I might as well just buy US dollar stablecoins, send it to person over there, instant settlement, and then I get my items shipped over to me. That's how a lot of people are using it.
Right. Okay. So the money conversation is a double whammy because it's not just a better money or stronger money alternatives. It's also the lower fees.
Yes.
Right. And so like that makes it a very competitive banking system.
And access.
Yeah. Yes.
Global
right.
access.
Yeah.
Global integration.
Permissionless access. Right.
Permissionless access.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's, I'm sure, as soon as you have like established bank account on Ethereum with your wallet and your money, then like you can start engaging in more sophisticated financial tools that we call DeFi.
Yes.
I'm sure that is a much more powerful set of financial tools than what the Africans can discover locally.
Yes.
And that's just the money and finance thing.
Yes.
That is like, that's where so much demand for Web3 utility products and services comes from. And then also identity on top of that as well. Yes. Interest?
The broad area of trust.
Trust.
So basically, wherever you need trust, here there's so many things that we take for granted, right? Like you get into a hotel room, or you buy a piece of land, or you order something online, you know something is going to be delivered. You kind of like assume that's already going to happen, right? In a place where there's not a lot of trust infrastructures, you're always asking, is what the person said actually going to come true?
Right.
If I have this thing, is it actually mine? Right. So all the different things of trust that you kind of take for granted, they're either non-existent or are very weak in many African countries.
Yeah. If any Bankless listeners just had the term settlement assurances come into their head, points for you. Settlement assurance is like core part of like what we believe makes crypto so powerful. Is the thing that you think is yours actually yours? That's like the beautiful thing about crypto is extremely high settlement assurances. And so it sounds like not just like money and settlement assurances is benefit for Africa, but just like identity as like this is also your identity too. And other people, not just yourself, but other people can also rely on that, which is important infrastructure. I want to ask about just like the culture of users who use these tools. In the United States, in the privileged land where we have like general abundance, like we have crypto is like a casino for us. It's like
absolutely.
Sadly, I mean it is one of these things that makes these things powerful and you proves all the use case. But we have the luxury of using this as a casino. And I'm wondering what is the culture or the disposition of African users who use crypto not as a casino, but because they actually really need it and it is legitimately a better tool. Like how would you describe just like how people engage with these things down there?
So sad reality is the casino still exists.
Oh, really?
It's everywhere. It's like you see a lot of that in Africa as well.
Okay.
Now we're in a bear market, which is actually good because there's not a ton of like blind speculation that's happening. But the other side, the real use cases, one is US dollar stablecoins. So that's something that a lot of people use for cross-border payments, for inflation and currency devaluation hedging.
I would assume inflation across Africa is terrible.
It's very high, and the other side is also, I'm hearing of fintechs, traditional fintech startups, who are actually becoming the key banking infrastructures on the continent. So you're finding startups providing better financial services than banks do, but that's a separate conversation. They're using crypto at the back end. They won't admit it, but they're using crypto at the back end.
Why won't they admit it?
Because it creates a lot of
crypto
issues. Crypto, exactly. Like you don't want a lot of attention. But when I talk to a number of exchanges, they're telling me that the biggest clients are fintechs, not retail users, which is fascinating. So they're using it for the treasury management. Again, if you cannot access US dollars and the currency that you're holding is being devalued over time, you want to put it in other asset classes. And crypto stablecoins make a lot of sense as a treasury management. It's just a smart thing to do. And it's more available to you in a permissionless way than knocking on the doors of a bank.
Yeah. The one thing that makes me just so happy and optimistic about this story is that individual Africans are choosing to use crypto tools by their own merits and adopting them and becoming bankless, getting all their bank accounts. But I actually think that part of the story is also very cool and optimistic too. Fintechs adopting crypto for the same reasons because it also provides them as businesses better foundations to provide financial services. So even if the individual African is not adopting crypto tools, the fintech layer of Africa is also improving because of crypto to do the rest of the mile.
Exactly. exactly. And I expect to see a lot more of that. Another area that I'm seeing some action in and I'm super excited about is the credit space. Now, for you and I and many people here, if you've got salary or whatever, it's easy for you to access some level of credit. Even if you have crypto, you can borrow money from Aave or Compound or whatever, right? But if you're just like, a small business, and most of African companies are small businesses, and you don't have a real asset that you can use as collateral, banks won't lend to you. So here's a sad reality. Banks lend to bankers.
Right.
Because it's bankers that have stable jobs that bankers think is solid, which is kind of weird and twisted, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have something that's valuable that you can collateralize, then you go to uncollateralized borrowing.
Right.
Do you know how much money you pay? Have a guess. Have a guess of how much interest are on average
on a year?
Yeah.
Higher than 20%.
Keep going.
40%?
Okay. So in Kenya and Nigeria, for example, a bunch of fintechs, they are charging 10 to 30% a month.
A month?
A month.
Oh, my numbers were in a year.
No.
10 to 30% a month. Because the risk is so high.
Well, yes.
Or perceived risk?
Perceived risk.
Not actual risk.
As well, some actual risk, some perceived risk.
Sure.
So some fintechs that I've talked to where the default rate is less than 10%, they're still charging super high because that's the current going market rate.
Is it just why is that the going market rate? Is it just a very inefficient market with no liquidity? So
liquidity is a big part of it, but the main issue is also just how to price risk.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Okay.
How to price risk. And also, as a borrower, I can borrow X amount of money from you, and then if I cannot pay it, then I go to someone else, borrow that money, and then pay you back. You get into these cycles.
So one person can cause 100 people's worth of destruction.
Exactly. So one interesting area of application that I'm seeing is there's some fintechs that are getting access of user data from mobile money, for example, which huge mass adoption there, and putting that on chain and helping you build on chain credit reporting, which helps you access on chain liquidity. So it's actually onboarding a whole lot of people into crypto without them even realizing it and helping you build on-chain reputation and track record, which now multiple fintechs can use as a single source of truth, as opposed to each one kind of determining, what your credit worthiness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And when I was previously talking about, so you have your Ethereum wallet or your Bitcoin wallet, and you're using stable coins, and that's all great because you get better money and cheaper fees. And then I was talking about DeFi. It's like, and also like DeFi is better. Like they can use Uniswap to swap tokens. Maybe they are. But I think maybe the bigger story is this credit. Access to credit is the bigger part of the finance for World for Africa.
Let me put it this way. You talked about casinos earlier, right?
Right.
My view is that in the Western and many Eastern worlds, crypto is a nice to have. For the masses, it's just a nice to have.
Right.
Because you already have so many things working for you, right? And that's where we hit
Banks are a nuisance, not a critical problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They exist.
Yeah.
They provide services. Governments provide services, even though we don't like them.
Right.
So for the 10% or 15% of us, crypto is so much more valuable, it's important, but it's hard to go above that unless you start adding real utility that is way better than the current system, right? And the friction is low. And that's what we keep talking about in these worlds. When you go to many African countries, the existing apparatus, the current paradigm is just not working, right? So that's where you can reach beyond the 5, 10, 15% of adoption rates of a whole population. You can go a lot higher than that when you start building applications that actually meet people's needs. So I think that's where the real opportunities to me is in Africa. Crypto can be a plan A, not a plan B, plan C, or plan F.
Not a backstop. It's
exactly
the first choice.
It's not a backup plan.
Right.
It is the plan.
Yeah. Well, so this thesis resonates, obviously. And I think anyone who's been in crypto long enough understands that, this is why we do this. This is why we're here. The opportunity is salient.
Yes.
So if the opportunity is so good, what's the venture landscape? What's the business landscape look like? I would imagine this would be interesting for more than a few VCs out there.
Yeah.
What's that like?
So in February, I led a trip with Vitalik and Aya for a month across 4 countries.
Aya Miyaguchi of the EF.
Aya Miyaguchi, who runs the EF and a number of other Ethereum communities. And we just held very low-key events, didn't make a big splash. And we had about a few hundred founders and builders came up. to various of those events.
Is Vitalik well known in Africa as he is in Argentina?
I don't know about how well he's known in Argentina,
Very well
but,
known. Very
but
well known.
we went to cafes and restaurants where people were trying to pay for our meals or come by and say hi. It was amazing. But also, I think people are quite respectful.
Sure.
So he wasn't getting overloaded,
Right.
people recognized him, and that was a really interesting litmus test. He was well known, and we met a whole lot of builders who are basically at the stage of building the core infrastructures. I think that's still very much needed. So on ramps and off ramps, exchanges, credit tools, lending pools. Means for people to basically create advances on their salaries. But we met a whole lot of people trying to build new stablecoins, either real-world asset-backed stablecoins or a basket of currencies, because that's where the energy is at. That's where the demand is at. And there's so many other builders who we met around, solving problems that you wouldn't think of coming from the West. So, for example, like in Ethiopia, getting medicine that's high quality and known is really hard. And the one common thing that we have is, if I'm visiting Ethiopia, I can tell you all my relatives are asking me, hey, Yosef, can you buy A, B, C, D, put it in your bag and bring it along here?
Yeah.
It's so common. And like every Ethiopian listening will totally get this.
Right. Yes.
It's just something we all do.
Right.
So there's a team that's actually building an application to like make that process a lot simpler. Like, hey, if I've got 2 kilos in my bag, I can get stuff that people need. But then how do I trust me? How do I trust what I'm buying is correct? So they're putting aspects of that on chain to create a level of transparency. So these types of applications, like you wouldn't think about it coming in the Western world, but African builders are working on those. So you see some like really original thoughts and approaches, but the market is still early. So crypto adoption, in my view, like really started in 2018, 2019. So we're just seeing one cycle on the continent. So it's still quite early, but last year there was about $150+ million invested in crypto companies, $5 billion in just general tech startups. So still a long way to go in terms of the venture space being developed.
Sure. So I'm kind of afraid about how naive this question is, but you said like adoption happens and it started happening in 2018. Well, I would say like even inside of America or Europe, the adoption didn't happen until then too.
Yeah.
And even throughout the bear market, we were still like looking for our use case.
Yes.
We were talking about, payments, we know that, but like we want more. But it really sounds like perhaps Africa is actually the continent that has adopted crypto the most. Is that true?
It is.
Already? It's already number one in crypto users.
So Kenya and Nigeria make the top 20 crypto adoption index.
Okay.
Last year, we had about $100 billion of on-chain transaction of volume. It's small compared to the rest of the world, but it's significant for the local economies. Many countries is between 5 to 15% of those populations. But if you see in actual numbers, Africa is 1.4 billion people. To put that into context, it's all of Europe, all of the United States, and all of South America combined. So it's a huge market, huge continent. Nigeria is just 250 million people. Ethiopia is 120 million people. So we're talking about large populations. So in sheer numbers, it is high. The volume per user, it's low.
What's the average age of Africa?
Median age is 19.
It's very young.
Median age is
That's
very 19.
extremely young.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the youngest part of the world.
What about like internet connectivity and access? Like how hard is it to access crypto?
Yeah. So about 590 million Africans have access to the internet, and that's growing 6% a year.
Okay.
So in urban areas,
6% a year.
6%. It's increasing by 6% a year.
That has to be the highest rate in the world, right?
Yeah. It's very high. I don't know. I haven't benchmarked with the rest of the world, but that's really high.
Right.
And in urban areas where 40% of the population lives, internet access is very high.
Right.
So one of the things I spent the last 2 years doing is actually talking to normal people, students, recent graduates, universities. Well, that's where a lot of the people are at, right? Just to understand what's their dream, what's their vision for their lives, what are the things that they're learning about. Many young people are learning online more than what they're learning in universities and in schools. 2/3 of all African developers are self-taught or learning on the job. So the internet is really opening up access to education and information. And I've talked to a number of folks who graduated in architecture, for example, and thinking, well, what kind of career can I build in architecture in my country here, unless I have an ability to go elsewhere? And then discover crypto. I said, this is so interesting. How about I teach myself Solidity? People teaching themselves Solidity on YouTube, on their mobile phones.
Right.
And then start working with DAOs and then earn your first few $100s and you buy a laptop.
Right.
And then you start contributing more to DAOs and you do it anonymously. No one cares.
Right.
No one needs to know who you are, where you're from. And people are making real income, real living as a full-time job without meeting a single person in real life who's working in the space. And that's really fascinating, how people are getting to this space on their own. Yes, there are a whole lot of people getting in to speculate, to buy shit tokens and all of that, but there are a whole lot of serious people getting to this space and seeing it as a real source of income and a real source of really maximizing the full potential as human beings without needing to leave home.
There's always this idea of leapfrogging technologies.
Yes.
I think this is typically used when Africa never really went desktop. It went just mobile first.
Yes.
And so it leapfrogged into that technology.
Yes.
I'm sure there's other examples that are low-hanging fruit that I'm going to forget in this moment.
We've had multiple leapfrogs on the continent. We leapfrogged landlines.
Right.
With
yes.
mobile.
Landlines. Yeah.
And it's so fast, right? I think the last data points that I checked, 93 out of every 100 user has set up a SIM card account on the continent. So that's that's huge, right? We leapfrog banks with mobile money, and now we're leapfrogging the centralized institutions with crypto.
And so it seems like, and that's I think the punchline in the combination of leapfrogging education tech with AI. Sorry to bring AI into the conversation, but just I'm sure AI is a powerful democratizing force of education.
Totally.
It's happening at the same time that Africa is able to leapfrog into better money and better financial services with crypto.
Yes.
And that part, leapfrogging technology is always an exciting conversation in of itself. But when you leapfrog money, is big because money is so deeply rooted in this, in the bottom of a social cultural stack.
Yes.
It is very important, critical social infrastructure.
Yes.
And so when you leapfrog advancements in money, the downstream net effects of that can only be bullish.
Massive.
We have to absolutely massive.
So massive. Yeah. Because a whole economy is built on that. If you don't have that, it's hard to build
everything else. Right. Trust is at the bottom.
Exactly.
You're leapfrogging trust.
Yeah, leapfrogging centralized institutions. And my view is that if we keep with the status quo, Africa's position at the bottom of the pyramid is pretty much locked in for at least the next 100 years.
Right.
Because it's there's a downward pressure to kind of keep you at that bottom of the pyramid.
Right.
And when you talk to a whole lot of young people, there are 900 million Africans who are under the age of 30. 900 million. They have dreams, they have desires, they want to have a much of this world as much as everyone else. Right. And so the best outlet is online, but then online is gated if you don't have a means to pay and receive money, right? You need that to power that. And so crypto is great, this makes a lot more sense. So this is not, to me, the Africa narrative here and opportunity is not just hey, let me put 5% of my assets into some high growth, high risk space and see what happens. No, I want to have access to the world, and this is giving me that.
Access to the world. That's beautiful. Also, the another opportunity really is that the incumbent continents like America and China, America is going to go down fighting, the banking system is going to go down fighting. They're trying to ban crypto before really allowing it to be adopted. And then most of the population doesn't care.
Yes.
Crypto is that weird thing with the Wall Street bets folk.
Yes.
And so they're not going to adopt it simply because they don't need it. And then the incumbent systems are going to fight it. Meanwhile, Africa is going to adopt it simply out of necessity and learn to use it and learn to refine it and grow it naturally and organically. That makes me bullish. Because it's accepting crypto. There's all continents and populations and cultures have to get over the accepting crypto hurdle. And it sounds like Africa's that hurdle for Africa is very, very low to the ground.
Exactly.
It's not hard to accept crypto in Africa.
This makes a lot more sense. And to me, it's not shops and everything accepting crypto necessarily. That's not the indication of success to me. It's not like onboarding everyone to the crypto economy. The way we think about it here is like, I don't want to have a bank. I don't want to have fiat. I don't want to hold any local payment systems. I think what I'm observing is actually people move fiat to crypto and then crypto to fiat to do things that fiat to fiat doesn't allow them to do. And that's a lot of things, right? So to me, it's not like just make everything Ethereum. and that makes sense. It's actually make your whole economy powered by Ethereum. Right. I think that's the bigger opportunity to me. It's not like what we talk about in our own crypto circles of like how the world can be more like live on decentralized blockchains. Is actually make decentralized blockchains the back end that powers the whole economy.
I remember this one line from Andreas Antonopoulos. He called it, I think it's like technology inversion, something inversion. And he was using the idea of once upon a time, we squeezed the internet through dial-up. And that's how we use the internet. And then we made broadband. And then that was, instead of having to put the internet through telephone lines, we made wires specifically for the internet. And then the internet exploded because it didn't have to get throttled through dial-up. And when you tell me like in the beginning stages, it goes from fiat to crypto to fiat to do things that fiat only can't do. To me, that's like we're trying to squeeze through crypto through the fiat bandwidth. And which is great. Is where you get started. You got to start somewhere. But then also merely doing that also sets the stage for the inversion, where we just do away with the fiat and we're like, okay, just crypto. Crypto only. And Africa sounds like it's first down that path.
And it's happening at scale in a lot of different places. And you talked about governments earlier. African governments are still wary and not sure about this space. There are some that have outright banned it. So when I talk about Africa, Africa is 54 countries, right? So it's very different dynamics. I actually love to talk about Africans, the people. It's like, this is people power. It's not institution power. And it's the people who have the needs, who have the demands. And I'm betting more on the African people building the infrastructures for an economy that works for them instead of waiting for a permissioned way to create this. So crypto is thriving despite governments, not as a result of governments.
And to my loose and uninformed take about like Africa is that's just like the borders. The countries of Africa mean less than the culture and communities of Africa, as in just like the boundaries of Africa was drawn by like Europeans, and they were some of them, in like the 1880s Berlin Conference, right? And so I think Africa, of all continents that are out there, is most primed to become borderless, using borderless tools like Ethereum, like crypto.
I have this vision that borderless Africa is what many young people are striving towards, but not necessarily like, hey, let's bring down the borders that we kind of see and know of. It's just the borders, like where borders create where borders create a lot of the barriers. Because the way IMF relates to Africa, the way the World Bank relates to Africa, the way the global powers relate to Africa is bordered nation by border nation, right? And so whenever you try to break free of that, you come across a brick wall that you can't pass through. So the shared experience of being separated from the world, separated from each other, that's the borders. There's a physical border, there's an economic border, there's a psychological border, and that's what I see many African builders thinking is like, I am African first and a citizen of that country second, because there's a shared experience and there's a shared challenge there. And I believe kind of inspired by you guys, Bankless, right? I think a borderless Africa makes a lot of sense.
That we also see that. We also see that. Yoseph, you're starting a venture fund.
I am.
Tell us about the strategy.
Things. So my vision is basically increasing crypto adoption on the continent in real world use cases and helping us build a borderless life for a whole lot of Africans. And I see that in multiple approaches. One is actually creating soil. I love the notion of infinite garden, right? So you need to build rich soil on the continent to help whole ecosystems to thrive, right? And that is around education, community building, awareness building, and that's all to me public public goods. That's one stuff I'm really focused on, is supporting a lot of communities on the ground, supporting events. Hopefully, you and friends can come, spend time there, connect with local communities. So there are a few events that are happening there. There's Eat Safari. It's a local Ethereum community happening in Kenya in September. So there's a lot of those beautiful things that are happening that I believe is public goods, and we need to put resources and support that. On the other side, when you have fertile soil, you need forests.
Right.
And those are the projects, the protocols, the applications that are actually bringing these visions to life. And to me, I think capital is a means to support and enable that to happen. So I'm building a venture fund to basically back African founders who have deep local context and understanding and are building from the bottom up and are long-term thinkers. And I didn't wake up thinking, hey, I'm going to be a VC, but that's the highest leverage way to actually support this work.
Right. Funnel capital into the places that it needs to go. Being a good capital allocator is one of the best things you can do to grow a burgeoning ecosystem inside of an economy that needs it. Why are you the right person to do this job? What's your advantage? Why are you going to be a great capital allocator for Africa? Like, what skills do you bring to the table?
So I have spent still the majority of my life on the continent, and I have felt the pain that many young Africans feel. And I have deep, in my blood, relationship with the struggle, right? And I feel like I've been extremely lucky in my life to have leapfrogged so many parts of society and, spent a lot of time in the US and the West and in the East. And I've seen that side of the world as well, and I've built a lot of relationships. And I see my role as a bridge builder between that world and African ecosystems where there's mutual value and relationship building. So that's one lens that I have. The other lens is I've spent the last 8-10 years building stuff. So I come from a builder perspective and world, and I have a deep empathy towards founders and builders who are down in the trenches, building the infrastructures that's going to last. So that's the lens that I'm bringing to the table. And the third is, I want to see the crypto world succeed, and I want to see Africa succeed. So I'm operating with a very long-term lens in mind. The sad realities on the continent today, there are a lot of mercenaries.
Sure.
Mercenary chains, mercenary protocols. I don't want to name names now.
Certainly.
But there's a lot of bad behavior that is underselling the value of crypto and underselling the value of where Africans want to go. So I'm positioning myself to do the opposite of that, hopefully, and help us build a thriving community, a thriving continent, and help global communities also understand and be part of Africa's journey. We saw China's growth in a tremendous way. We're seeing India's growth and development, and technology has been a big part of that. Now is the phase of Africa. And I don't think the world understands what's happening there. I don't think the crypto world understands the potential. And I want to see more of the Ethereum community get plugged in and connect, because I believe the Ethereum values are deeply aligned with where many young Africans want to go. And I want to help build that bridge.
Where are you in the setting up this fund? Where are you in the life cycle of this fund, and what are you're currently raising? And if people are interested, where can they go to find out more?
They could reach out to me, Yoseph@hey.com. Or
we'll get those links in the show notes.
Sure. Or reach out to me on Twitter. Happy to chat on that front. Building it, and there's a lot of projects that I'm ready to back right now, so I'm really keen to get going as soon as possible. But the main thing I'd say is, there are a lot of people who are kind of raising fund and cutting corners and all of that. To me, it's about relationships, and it's a long-term journey. So if people want to invest, it's less. There's the money part of it, but there's also hey, let's actually build a direct relationship with African builders, and this is one of the gateways for them to do so.
Well, Yoseph, the thesis makes sense to me, and I think that if in the world where we fast forward into the future and crypto hadn't completely integrated it into Africa and really helped out at a very deep level, then we've deeply failed as an industry. We should look at Africa as the first main validation of what we can do for the rest of the world, because it seems like Africa's running for it first. And so I wish you the best of luck on your venture arm, and I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thanks so much. crypto needs Africa. So let's make it happen.
Oh yeah, give us the bull case for our bags. Give us for us Westerners who are going to stick around in front of our TVs and our computers, and we're just going to I hope Africa uses the crypto. What is the bull case for crypto if Africa adopts it in the best ways that it can?
Yeah.
Why is it good for
the
our
last
bags?
10 years, we've been talking about mass adoption. We've been talking about real world use cases beyond just the intellectual circles that we navigate in.
Right.
Well, the masses in mass adoption are in Africa, right? So we're going to pay more attention there if we want to have this technology to be used in daily life, whether it's a bull market or a bear market, and people derive real value from. And if you're deriving real value, you pay fees, right? And there's a real economic model to sustain it. I believe that's where Africa contributes to the crypto narrative and cycle. So I think for this industry to succeed and to actually survive the test of time, we need that.
Right.
We need the real stuff.
Right.
And the real side of the conversation, to me, Africa is a big part of it. It's not the only part, but it's a huge part of that narrative.
Yosef, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, David.
Cheers. Are you a MetaMask user? Well, you're listening to Bankless, so of course you are. The wallet you know and love just got a whole lot better. MetaMask Portfolio is the ultimate one-stop shop for all of your crypto needs. It gives you a holistic view of your crypto portfolio across multiple chains and multiple addresses all at once. You can easily view and manage all your coins, tokens, and NFTs in one convenient place just by connecting your wallet. MetaMask Portfolio goes beyond just viewing your portfolio though. Inside the portfolio, you can do all the incredible money verbs that make DeFi so powerful. You can buy, swap, bridge, and stake your crypto assets with ease. It's like having a powerful battle station for all your DeFi moves right at your fingertips. So if you're looking to do more in Web3 your way, MetaMask Portfolio is the answer. I already know that you have MetaMask wallet, so go check out your MetaMask portfolio. Learn more at metamask.io/portfolio. Introducing Polygon 2.0, the value layer for the internet. For too long, the limitations of blockchains have held back app development and stifled user adoption. The internet allows anyone to create and exchange information. What's missing is a value layer that lets anyone exchange, store, and program value. That's where Polygon 2.0 comes in. Polygon Labs has unveiled a series of innovations that will radically alter the Polygon ecosystem and Web3 as a whole. By leveraging groundbreaking ZK innovations, such as Polygon ZK EVM, the next iteration of the best-in-class Plonky 2 proving system, and a first-of-its-kind ZK-powered interoperability layer, Polygon 2.0 will give users and devs unlimited scalability and unified liquidity. Right now, there is a Polygon improvement proposal regarding a potential ZK-powered upgrade of Polygon Proof of Stake. If approved, Polygon Proof of Stake would become a Layer 2 ZK EVM Validium. So make your voice heard on this proposal by joining the Polygon Discord today. You have a chance to help the Polygon community give the internet the value layer it deserves. Arbitrum is accelerating the Web3 landscape with a suite of secure Ethereum scaling solutions. Hundreds of projects have already deployed onto Arbitrum 1, with a flourishing DeFi and NFT ecosystem. Arbitrum Nova is quickly becoming a Web3 gaming hub, and social dApps like Reddit are also calling Arbitrum home. And now, Arbitrum Orbit allows you to use Arbitrum's secure scaling technology to build your own Layer 3, giving you access to interoperable, customizable permissions with dedicated throughput. All of these technologies leverage the security and decentralization of Ethereum and provide a builder experience that's intuitive, familiar, and fully EVM compatible. Faster transaction speeds and significantly lower gas fees. Arbitrum empowers you to explore and build without compromise. Visit arbitrum.io, where you can join the community, dive into the developer docs, bridge your assets, and start building your first app on Arbitrum. Bankless Nation, we are here in Zuzalu, and I'm with Eche Emole.
Yes.
Eche, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Zuzalu means many, many things for many different people. What does it mean for you?
I think the one word that encapsulates Zuzalu for me and even for the Afropolitan community is access, right? Being able to have a seat at a table especially when you get to be around some of the brightest minds in the world, where a lot of these frontier knowledges are being pushed, you have access to that seat. And for so long, I would say a lot of Africans have been last to the party when the cake has been shared. And when we come, we're like, oh, we don't even get crumbs. What's going on, right? So for me, Zuzalu represents access, right? And access at the front seat of the table.
Okay, so you mentioned Afropolitan, which is the thing that you want to bridge towards here at Zuzalu. But specifically for your movement, access is important. But what's here in Zuzalu for that movement?
So first, I think we were able to also come here with at least 20 plus of our citizens, right? coming out to Montenegro, I mean, you're around, again, some of the brightest minds, right? So you have founders within our network, creatives within our network, professionals within our network. They're able to come here, collaborate, connect. Even I think a few of them got some investment opportunities as well. Again, it's like access not just to even the people, but just again to the capital that's probably available or to the information that's available, which is huge because for a long time, the way the world has been set up, there's an information arbitrage, which is you know and we don't know, and because you know, we don't get to be at a seat at the table. So again, that's what this represents for us.
Sure. Okay, so let's dive headfirst into the movement.
Yeah.
What is the Afropolitan movement?
So I would say,
Is movement the right word?
definitely the right word. And I think I probably want to just give context real quick. So I think the best way to understand the Afropolitan journey is to think about it in 3 phases, right? Phase 1 of Afropolitan is an organization I started while in law school in San Francisco, catering to the African diaspora through events. So think your favorite Afrobeats parties, concerts, festivals.
Cultural events.
Cultural events, yeah. A significant highlight of that phase 1 was something called the Year of Return that happened in Ghana in 2019, where we basically helped facilitate about 1 million plus people from the diaspora heading to Ghana. It generated about $2 billion worth of economic activity for Ghana, right? That's phase 1. Phase 2 then starts in 2020, where we wanted to reload the Year of Return again, and then COVID happens, right? COVID decimates the entire in-real-life events industry, and we were forced to pivot, and we pivoted into media, but through a social audio app called Clubhouse.
Right.
So in Clubhouse, between I and my co-founder Chika, we built communities on there of about 200,000 people collectively, right? And we showed the capacity for collective action, which made us very ready when the next year, 2021, Balaji Srinivasan, right? He drops this article called How to Start a New Country. And in the article, this was April 2021, and we were in Dakar, Senegal, actually, when we read this. And he proposes this idea of a network state, which is a highly aligned online community with a capacity for collective action that's able to crowdfund territory around the world and eventually gain diplomatic recognition in pre-existing states. Now, when I read it, it was like, man, this is like a powerful idea, but it was more theoretical, but I could see the shapes of it. But there was a particular quote in that article that I think really held us to the idea where he says, because the brand new is unthinkable, we fight over the old. And I think for us, it was like, damn, it feels like that encapsulates.
That's a good one.
It felt like that encapsulated what we felt as Africans. Like we consistently fight over the old, whether it's historical constraints or colonial baggage. We're not able to transcend into the future, right? And so for the rest of the year, this is where Bankless comes in. We red pill our way into Web3, right? A lot of Bankless podcasts, a lot of like articles. You just consistently, like every weekend, you've been through those rabbit holes where you're just consistently Web3 driven. And come December 2021, I wake up in Nairobi, Kenya at 5 a.m. I'm pacing the room for about an hour. My partner's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, look, I know how I would look at someone who's about to tell you what I'm about to tell you, but I think we need to start a new country. And she's like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, but we need to find out why, because you're towing the line between being a conspiracy theorist and like just being cuckoo bird, right? And we drew some inspiration from the American founding fathers, from the Federalist One, where Anthony Hamilton basically says, is it possible for societies of men to form a new constitution through reflection and choice? Or are we forever destined to depend on our governance through accident and force? And we were like, damn, that's our why. No modern day nation state in Africa was created through reflection and choice. It has always been through accident and force. And so what would it look like if we could form a new country, but this time with people who have shared values and purpose in a borderless manner, right? The internet enables us to organize around shared values. If Facebook, for example, was a country with its own cryptocurrency, it would be the largest country in the world. But this time, instead of an online passive community, which is what Facebook is as a social network, it's now a community aligned around shared values and purpose with its own currency, and then you can get recognition from pre-existing states based on that. And so our why is pretty strong, right? And it cuts across, like I said, we're trying to do away with a lot of the historical constraints and the colonial baggage, and that whole idea of because the brand new is unthinkable, we fight over the old. That's why our ideology is one of abundance, because we're seeing scarcity wreck a lot of stuff across Africa, or just being African in the world. And we want to build upon an ideology of abundance of tools, abundance of even in mindset, abundance of resources, and that's the way we see it.
So I've talked with a few other network state people, and like the broad pitch is man, we haven't had a new city or a new country in over hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so we're built on old foundations, like you said. And so like it's just like the incumbents of the world. I do really enjoy the idea of thinking about countries and governments as like incumbents that could be disrupted, which most people don't think about.
Yeah.
But for many people, like people in the United States, people, I'm assuming also Europe, are like, that's a great thought experiment.
Yeah.
Like interesting article, some good brain candy. But like practically I'm comfy with where I am. But also I think with what you're teasing here is that like Africa particularly is primed for this.
Yeah.
As in it can be not a thought experiment.
Yes.
It can be a manifesto.
Yes.
So can you give the pitch to people who are uninformed about Africa, why Africa is so primed for a network state movement?
Yeah. So I would say, and I could give this in an analogy and I could give this in a fact. So picture a house that has a weak foundation, right? You go into this house and you say, hey, we want to fix the weak foundation. But instead of starting with the foundation, you start painting the walls.
Sure.
You start fixing the AC.
Right.
You start fixing the fans. And then you're like, oh, pop up the window. And then you're like, the house is stable, but it still collapses, right?
Yeah.
Because the foundation is weak. The weak foundation in that analogy is our governance systems across Africa, right? The AC is maybe like our fintech industry. The fans are like maybe our health tech industry or whatever industry exists. What happens is we have this idea that we can entrepreneur our way out of these problems, and it doesn't work because eventually the weak foundation collapses these different sectors that are trying to thrive, right? So for us, we're saying, why don't we go foundational? Fix the actual foundation, because when you compare Africa to the rest of the world, there's a sense of, is this a feature or is this a bug, right? And so our argument is it's a feature, and we'll explain why. When it's a bug, what it looks like is Singapore, Vietnam, Dubai. These are countries that, for the most part, maybe got their independence after a lot of African countries. So I'll give you an example. Vietnam War ended in 1975. Nigeria got its independence in 1960. That's a full 15 years head start. Look at Vietnam today, look at Nigeria today, right? Singapore, right? The Singaporean leader would literally come to, Lee Kuan Yew would literally come to Africa to visit because Singapore hadn't necessarily achieved its independence yet. Look at Singapore today. Look at like a whole host of African countries. 9 out of the 10 countries with the highest poverty rates are from Africa, right? And so for us, why we're saying it's a feature, not a bug, it's because the feature was we never actually started it through reflection and choice, right? The Vietnamese fought for what they believed in, right? The Singaporeans also put out their own constitution and fought as well for what they believed in. Where did we had a fight for independence, but it was never based on any philosophical underpinnings, right? What was the reflection and what was the choice? Keep in mind also, because of the borders that were drawn haphazardly in the Berlin Conference, right? A lot of tribes just got tossed in and the borders just got rewritten, where when you visit Africa today, you can cross the border and they speak the same language, but there's just a line in front of them that was drawn by someone else, again, who was not privy or maybe didn't even care about the realities on the ground, which brings us back to the whole Zuzalu point, right? The original seat at the table was the Berlin Conference, right? Where things are being divided and a whole continent is being shared. I bet you there was no African in there being like,
Right. And just to dive into the history, because like the Berlin Conference, 1880, I think.
1890, 80 something.
Yeah, a bunch of Europeans come down and draw the map of Africa from Berlin. And this
is no Google Maps, by the way.
And so they're drawing lines which are completely incongruent with the actual cultural divisions that are in the space, which was where more organically emergent boundaries would be formed. And so this has been the way that this is, and it's not like
till today.
It's not like the tribes of Africa then settled into those boundaries post.
Till
and so there's still tribal differences. And so you're saying that discrepancy between where the European lines are of Africa versus the actual cultural topology of Africa, because there's discrepancy there, because there's friction there, that makes Africa primed for a new map or a new country.
Yes, because the network states allow us to redraw those colonial borders, but this time digitally first and then land second, right? So because now you're forming a new society or a new nation, but this time it's around shared values and purpose. And so it's no longer about like the historical constraints or the colonial baggage or saying, hey, we don't speak the same language or we don't have the same religion or all the things that divide us that are the old. We're trying to disembark from those to do the brand new. And so for that requires us basically recruiting like the sort of folks who would have come on the ship heading on a Mayflower, basically. So it's like because that's a different sort of mindset. So right now we've set up with 500 citizens or 500 passports. You're looking to recruit the folks who, I don't know if you're into a lot of Viking shows, like Ragnar Lothbrok and all that stuff.
Vaguely, yeah.
Okay, but the whole idea is like you had people who were like, we're tired with our status quo. We're gonna go on the ship. It's the unknown. We don't know. But it is better than our status quo. We know that for a fact. Whatever is out there has to be better than our status quo. And so for us, it involves us reaching out globally to recruit the sort of people who would have boarded the Mayflower, which only started with 100 and something people, by the way. Right? And now, obviously, the U.S. is like a 300 million people country, trillions of dollars of GDP. But it's the same mindset of we want the new world, we want a new order, and the reason is because our status quo actually sucks. Like, this isn't even like, it's terrible across every industry. I just gave you a stat of 9 out of the top 10 countries in the world with the highest poverty rates are from Africa. Let's not talk about what devaluation has done to our currencies. Proper shit. So when crypto came, right, it was like, okay, now you have crypto, and now you have the ability to maybe form with the internet to organize around shared values. Why don't we try for that? Right, and that allows us to potentially, hopefully, transcend our current status quo. Yeah.
The one concerning theme of like the network state movement is that you have a bunch of just like centralized founders trying to make a city.
Yeah.
Right. And what gets me optimistic about this movement is that the case for why Afropolitan, why Africa is the right place to actually apply these principles first is the latent demand in the people, in the population, in the community, in the culture. The culture is ready to accept a movement. Or at least that's my attitude, and I think what you're saying. Could you just go into like why the culture is ready to accept a network state movement? Like, why is this not going to be a top-down implementation from some leaders?
I think it's the same reason why when you look at a lot of stats about crypto, you see a lot of African markets pop up, right? When you think through the principles of like blockchain and Web3, it's maybe transparency, accountability, immutability, no single point of failure, right? What continent has experienced the opposite of that?
Sure.
That's Africa till today. Single points of failure across all our governments, right? Across our CBNs or central banks, our currencies are shit. Like when I'm telling you, bro, like I'm talking about tissue paper, it's probably better, man. Seriously. And so the people don't have faith even in their local currencies, right? So then they reach for either USD equivalents or crypto. So crypto then acts as a store of value for people on the continent. And then talk about transparency. Like there's a low trust deficit because we don't trust our governments, and because of that we don't also trust our institutions. So blockchain or even crypto allows for us to say, hey, you don't even need to trust Eche and Chika. It's transparently on the blockchain.
The founders.
Yes, the founders, right? And so it's not a thing where, and our governance, especially if it's through a DAO, right? There's no single point of failure. So if Eche and Chika start screwing up, you can get them out of here, and then you can continue going, right? Or if Eche and Chika, because if you think about past historical movements like this, whether it's like the MLKs or the Malcolm X's or whatever, once they died or once they got taken out, the movement dies, right? And so it's, again, how do you not allow for a single point of failure? How do you allow for accountability, transparency, and because it's also immutable, it has immutable aspects, it leads for more trust. So one example I would give is when we released our passports, I loved just being able to go to Etherscan and see all the smart contracts details. So I remember a citizen couldn't find where they sent their passport NFT to, and all we just collectively had to do was just go on Etherscan and we're like, hey, you sent it to this address and not to this address, right? And it was like, you didn't have to wait for us to go into the back room and then go look for papers. And no, it's like publicly on chain, and it allows for us to then hold folks accountable. And I'll tell you another reason why. In Africa, there's a lot of corruption, especially even with government budgets and stuff, right? You have budgets that are passed, and maybe one of the projects is to complete a bridge or complete a road or whatever. And the money gets allocated. The bridge never gets built. The road never gets built. And when you ask her, where did the money go to? Where's this? You start hearing all these stories like, oh, a snake ate it. Right. Or literally, I'm talking about literally a snake ate it, a monkey came in. And these are real official stories from a government, right? And for us, it's like, hey, it's not that blockchain prevents you from stealing, but you steal more transparently. You know what I mean? And for that, it then allows us to at least have a standing point to hold you accountable, which we don't have today. So then coming back to the whole network state idea is, look, the young Africans today are ready for a borderless world, right? Crypto also speaks to them. It's an emerging market thing. These principles apply more to a continent that's crying out for this because we're tired of living in conditions that don't speak to our need for freedom, right? And so for us, what's the one thing that allows us to enshrine our freedom in code, right? It's the blockchain, but also a potential network state as well. And I think that's the approach that we're taking.
Beautiful. What would you say, what is the Afropolitan Roadmap, if there is one?
Yeah,
and where are we in that roadmap?
So there are 4 phases of the roadmap. Phase 1 for us is what we're calling building out the network, which is us literally going out and recruiting the best Africa and the diaspora and our allies have to offer across multiple sectors. I think the reason what that is we believe that a nation has to be formed not just by tech founders or not just by financiers. It needs to be collective. So you need to also reach out to the artists. Like the Renaissance movement, especially in Europe, helps usher in a lot of all the other advances in science and other industries as well. So we've been very intentional about recruiting those folks and we released our first 500 passports, NFT art passports. To get those, you had to apply. What we were filtering for was high alignment, right? So it's not just to say, hey, I want to get your NFT and pump and dump and flip it and go on Blur or OpenSea. No, it was like, hey, I want to be a part of this movement and I want to contribute to this movement, right? And then we released those. That's phase 1. And obviously we'll release more passports as we go. So we're recruiting people as we go. Phase 2 for us is what we're calling government as a service. So it's like come for the network, stay for the tool, right? And for us, we're modeling that around a super app type of idea where it's like within this app, you're able to do things like potential e-residency, self-sovereign ID, being able to make payments for goods and services using the Afropolitan currency, a token one day, and just being able to just ladder up services on there. And I think it's similar to like a WeChat in terms of comparison out of China, which they average about $57 per user by offering a bunch of different services. We're looking to model that out as well within the Afropolitan platform. Phase 3 for us is what's called the minimum viable state, which is how do we ladder up the credibility or build up the credibility to be viewed as a country one day. You don't just come and say, hey, we're a country, recognize us. It's what
Here's
are the
our
things?
flag.
Yeah, here's our flag. What are the things you've done to show that you even have the responsibility or the capacity?
Legitimacy. Where does your legitimacy come from?
Right. And so in September of last year, we got recognized by the New York Stock Exchange as the first ever internet country for the African diaspora. Again, that's more of a perception play, right? Because the New York Stock Exchange is a 200-year-old institution, right? And they're recognizing you as a internet country for the African diaspora. Today it's the New York Stock Exchange. Tomorrow it could be the United Nations, right? And so other than that, we provide visa and arrival services for 4 African countries today, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Tanzania. And the thought process behind that is we started off as an entertainment and tourism company. When you try to go through the official channels in a lot of these governments, you get hit with bureaucracy. When you come through us, we're all about efficiency and capacity. We just get it done. Right? Like we're a government or we're a services company, we just get it done. We cut through all the murk and just go to handle it. And I think from that is similar to, I always give the example of Amazon, right? If Amazon says to me today, like, hey, Eche, I need your garage key to drop off your packages in your room. Right? I'm like, here. you have earned my trust over so many years. They're like, hey, just do what you have to do, right?
Please place it in the top dresser, top door.
Thank you. And I appreciate all this help you have done over the years. And the reason for that is they've aggregated their trust over years. I remember the first time that I didn't get something properly delivered through Amazon, and before I could say refund, the money was in my account.
Right.
And I was like, God damn. And it's like, now you have me as a lifetime value customer because I'm like, these are the people who've earned my trust, and that trust is compounded. Right. That's the same way we're thinking about phase 3, right? Yeah. Phase 4 for us.
Just to dive into that, because I think that's such an important point.
Yeah.
To me, the success, getting the green checkbox on phase 3 is like the tipping point, because this is the fight that we say on Bankless, which is the fight for hearts and minds.
Yes.
Right? And so you said you're here in Zuzalu to access, for access.
Yes.
Accessing what? Accessing a network, accessing capital, accessing influence, because the way that you get the hearts and minds is that you get people on board to accept the movement as legitimate. But the movement, you can't just accept it as legitimate just because it's a good idea. You also have to actually meaningfully improve people's lives.
Exactly.
Right? And so that's where that phase 2 comes into play, where you actually start providing value and services, not just a meme, not just a movement, but you actually meaningfully move the needle in people's lives. For people who are agnostic to the movement. It's like, the movement I don't really care about, but they helped me and they improved my life. And and then so phase 3 is you turn up the dial on that. You turn up the juice on that. You get more capital, you get more leadership, you just win the hearts and minds game, and you get larger institutions to accept you as legitimate, not because they're going begrudgingly, but because they think like this is a real. I want to align with that force.
Yes.
That is a movement that is powerful. Again, I don't care. I mean, I don't necessarily care about that movement. I'm agnostic to that movement, but I acknowledge that it is powerful and that it's in my interest to accept it as legitimate.
You have encapsulated that so perfectly, and I think even doubling down on that, what we say when you go read our manifesto is we are curators of African talent, culture, experiences, capital, and information. And all those things is what we're looking to use to aggregate our leverage. So we have founders within the network today who literally have gotten funded by being part of the network, right? For raising capital, or the exclusive informations that we get access to, or the experiences, or the culture, right? And so for us, it's you want to be viewed as, hey, this is a powerful movement that I want to align myself to, because first of all, they don't fuck around. But first of all, you just want to have these people on your side, right? And so it's basically dialing up the knobs on everything. Like wherever it is that you have leverage, you just dial it up to 100, right? And you apply it so that people are like, hey, I might not even really care about their whole alignment, a sovereign movement or whatever, but you realize that the people within this network are people who represent the influence and the power and the leverage that you would want to have with anything that you're looking to do. And that has been something that we're like dialing up the knob on, right? So even like with Zuzalu, like a lot of folks are like, how did you guys even get access to this, right? And it's like, yeah, we're here, we're at a seat at the table, we have information.
The people of Zuzalu have dubbed this movement legitimate.
Exactly, right? And so you leverage that and dial up the knob in other areas as well, right? So yeah, I think you've encapsulated that perfectly.
Okay, take me to phase 4,
which is the last phase. So it's the land phase, right? So it's
a redrawing the map phase.
Yes, yeah. I love that. And we want to combine two concepts together for that. We don't just want a border anymore to be 4 corner borders. We want a discontinuous border that cuts across the world, similar to like a Chinese wall type of border, but across the world. What would that look like? We want to combine two concepts together. One is the embassy, and the other one is a Chinatown. Take, for example, the U.S. Embassy in maybe Montenegro is a sovereign territory in a host government, right? In Chinatowns, they have their own post office, their own malls, their own banking, their own services, right? We want to combine those two concepts together to get us a sovereign Afro-town.
Sovereign Afro-town.
Yes.
Okay.
Located in every major city in the world.
Okay.
So going back to the whole visa issues I was telling you about before, imagine you just had a sovereign Afro-town and you're an Afropolitan citizen and you're just going to the Afro-town within Montenegro.
Right.
You might not be running into the same immigration issues if you're just going to where your own town is, right?
You're going from home to home.
To home. To home. To home. To home.
To home. To home.
Exactly.
To home.
And so let's then zoom out, right, for this roadmap. You're an Afropolitan citizen. You navigate the world with your Afropolitan passport. You're able to make payments for goods and services using the Afropolitan platform with Afropolitan currency, cryptocurrency. And you're able to get physical entry into sovereign Afro-towns located across the world, right? And so, like, when people hear us say this vision, they're like, nah, you guys might have jumped off the cliff. But I think for us, it's when we're thinking through what is it that we want? It's like we want freedom at scale, but we're tired of navigating the world from the place of outsiders. Like the hoops that we have to jump through all the time, even if you have the same earning power, it's insane. But we've gotten so used to it that we're navigating the world consistently from a place of survival, where I'm like, I'm enough is enough, because we've been to the same schools. We've read the same books. We watch the same YouTube shows. So we now know that the advantages are not necessarily innate. It's just information arbitrage. We're going to have to go fix this. So we're locked out of the global financial systems. I can give you an example. When I travel across Nigeria or when I'm in Africa, I might not be able to access some of my U.S. banking apps, right? And then you call them and you say to them, like, hey, what's going on? Like, why can't I access my money, like, on my bank? And they're like, hey, Nigeria, it might be a fraud issue. There's a lot of Nigerian princes out there, so protecting you. And so you ask them, like, so this is a database decision, and like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. So pull up the top 10 countries on your platform where fraud happens. Right. And I want to know if you've banned all of them, because Nigeria is not even in the top 10. Right. And I'm like, oh, but I see, are you banning Russia? Are you banning China? Are you banning Poland? Are you banning all these countries? No. Why? Everyone goes silent. But what's being said to me, it's not even a racism issue. It's more of like, they have power, they have influence, they have resources, and you don't. So I was very heavy on philosophy, Greek philosophy back in the day, and there's always been this quote where it says, the strong do what they can, the weak endure what they must, right? And for us, it's, from an Afropolitan mindset is we know the cards that life has dealt us. We just refuse to accept them.
Sure.
And that's just the basis of where we're at. And so right now we're in phase 1, right? Phase 1, we put out the passports. They sold out. We're going to release some more. But every day, even while being at Zuzali, you're consistently recruiting people, whether it's allies or just even pure citizens or even visa holders to your movement. But you're consistently recruiting because, again, our goal is if we can get critical mass, we aggregate leverage at scale, and we can then apply it to the causes and the goals that we care for. Yeah.
Just to dive into phase 4 a little bit more, something I've learned while here at Zuzalu that I probably should have known anyways, but I needed to learn it, is this word diaspora.
Yeah, diaspora.
Can you define that word for us? for me and the many Bankless listeners that actually don't know that word.
Bro, you just killed me.
I know, I'm sorry.
Just know this
I'm
already.
sorry.
No, but I love Americans for that because Chica's that too. And every time she's learning something about immigrants, and I'm like, yeah, don't worry. Like, it's a whole different type of story. So diaspora is folks who, for the most part, like I consider myself an African diaspora, right? And for the most part, my family left Nigeria for better opportunity and optionality in our lives, right? Because our status quo just wasn't it. Most diaspora movements are like that, whether it's the Chinese diaspora, the Indian diaspora, any diaspora movement, which is we are born into a country and the opportunities and the optionality, we don't have it, right? We want opportunities and optionality in our lives for our families, for our children. We then migrate out, right? And so when we migrate out, we still have connections to the homeland because we still might have other family members who are not able to come or we're not able to get visas, right? But what we then do is we send money back home. So the African diaspora sends about $70 billion of remittances yearly, right? That's a huge, like in Nigeria's case, that's bigger than our foreign direct investments from anything else. Sure. So our diaspora is literally holding up the country from a foreign direct investment perspective. And so those are the type of roles the diaspora plays. It's the diaspora that says, okay, now I've gone to America, I might have a job. I might start off with a low-paying job, but maybe I walk my way up. But now the money I send back home is not able to support my family. They might be able to get health care. I might not be able to buy a home or a house for people back home. I might be able to send other folks to school to get them other opportunities to go. And so that's the thought process. That's that's the role of a diaspora. And it's a lot of responsibility, right? It's like you feel it as you go. Like you're not just here by yourself. You represent a lot of other people. So it's almost like when we get access into rooms, your goal is to basically keep the door open for all the other folks who can't get into it. And you always carry that sense of responsibility because there are folks who just get into that door and like, hey, guys, you're going to have to figure out your ways to get in here, similar to how I did. But for us and for like even Afropolitan, we feel that weight of responsibility, which is why by being at Zuzalu, you're like, I'm not just representing myself. I'm representing all the folks who I know would never even have a chance to even be able to get in here. So that's the diaspora movement. Yeah.
Right. And just to try and put it into just like the most concrete words possible that I've understood it, it's like people who have a home away from home.
Exactly.
Right.
Always.
And so people that are like African, that live elsewhere because of opportunity or many other reasons. They were just raised there. They could be raised there.
Yeah.
But they also have family members and their cultural roots.
Exactly.
And they also, in their mind, consider Africa or whatever part of the region also home because of family and culture. And so there's a bridge that's connected.
Always.
And so the African diaspora is like, which is just kind of cool to think of like the spreading out of Africans all over the world as like a movement. But everyone considers Africa home. And so it's like the bridges that are connected everywhere else, but also has roots back in Africa. And so that I think is also why like an African network state is so primed. Because it is a network state. It is networked all around the world anyways.
Exactly. It's like a human chain link over the internet, right? And I think we even consider the African American diaspora as part of, or the African American community as part of that diaspora as well. Because remember, we were talking about the whole accident and force, right? So the force part could also be even slavery if you go back way enough. Because it's like they didn't necessarily leave the continent voluntarily, right? So it's like, how do we, because the African American community is, their economic spending power is a $1.5 trillion spending power. And they're like 44 million people as a population. Africa has 1 billion people and our GDP is $2 trillion. So you can imagine a world if you could combine the spending power of the African American community to Africa, that's a boost as well. And that's what we were able to do with the year of return that happened in 2019. It was a proof of concept, right? And so for us, it's to say like, look, a lot of them don't feel, even though they have passports or they're citizens of America, they don't feel sometimes like citizens because they're treated sometimes as subjects, right? Whereas in Africa, we're citizens, but we don't have any of the benefits of being citizens.
Right.
And so for us, it's how do we create a bridge that allows us to, again, aggregate our leverage at scale? What do you have that's useful? And what do we have that's useful? And can we bring it to the same table and then use that to navigate the world through? Right, because right now we're just all divided and in silos, and I think through Afropolitan, it's a bridge that's supposed to connect this diaspora together as well. So.
Right, and so the vision, the idea that I have in my head is like first. There's the main hub of the actual network state in Africa, and we're getting rid of the 1880s
Berlin Conference.
Berlin Conference, Europeans drawing the line, and we're making a new network state that is resonant with actual African culture and the African
relevant
people, right?
Exactly, yes.
But then also you have the African diaspora all over the world with the what'd you call them, the towns, the sovereign towns,
Afro towns,
and so those, the idea isn't for like Africans to finally have a place that they can truly call culturally home. The also is to call the other parts of the world home as well.
Global
but they're
citizens.
satellites of this part of Africa that is now resonant with actual Africans, and it's all over the world. Which actually makes it like when we talk about building a country in the year of 2023, that is way more powerful than just a single country.
Exactly.
It's actually a global movement. Which, again, a naive Westerner here, but a naive white Westerner here, but just like I would imagine that the African community has never been able to actually truly have its own home. But that's because it's everywhere.
Exactly.
It's the whole world.
Exactly.
And no other culture has that.
Exactly. So I'll tell you like a quick story. So again, that helped inform my mindset on this. I moved to the U.S. when I was 15 with my family from Lagos, Nigeria. And I moved to California, right? I went to school, like private white high school where I was like the only black kid. And I remember coming from Nigeria, you have a situation where I had no concept of race. Like we're all black. Like I didn't even know that race existed. Right. And but in Nigeria, when we did our studies, if you didn't get a good grade, you would get spanked or you get flunked. Like literally, if you didn't get an A, you could really get flunked at school. So I come to America. I'm in Dublin, California, and I take my first U.S. history exam, and I score like a 98, right? And I'm like, and then the teacher's like, how? Yeah, right. But then the next person is maybe like in their 70s or something. And I'm over there like culturally like, like are they about to get beat? Are they about to like, what's the issue? And no one's getting flogged or no one's getting beat. I'm like, okay, cool. But so there was, you could get beat, but you would also have shame for the grade you just got. Right. And there was no shame. Right. And I'm like over there puzzled like, so first of all, they're not getting flogged for failing or not getting an A. And then there's no shame attached to not getting the grade. What's the reason for that? And so later on in life, as I'm navigating a lot, because I usually find myself as the only black person in a lot of white spaces, I was like, yo, when you've already won at life, what is a grade? Because they're moving from abundance. They have audacity. They're the people who are like, hey, we're going to put a man in the moon in 10 years, and they go do it. For us as Africans, like we're still in a survival state. So we're not moving from abundance, which is why you get flogged for not getting a grade because they think that encapsulates failure in your life when that's not true. So for me, it was like that level of audacity, bro, that I saw when I was in that school. I want to inject that into every African person in the diaspora and across the board. Because for us, it's like, how do we ensure our freedom at scale? So it's like, because we also want to travel, and that's the point I was trying to get to that story. It's, we want to see the world too. We want to go around, we want to visit different cultures, but by virtue of where we've been born, a lot of us don't ever get a chance to do that. And you can't put a price on the role exposure plays in your mind. You had a lot of folks who went down the Silk Road and brought back ideas back to their hometowns. We're not even able to get to travel to be able to be maybe in a Zuzalu where you're being impacted by different ideas, where you can take it back to your home country and be like, this is how they're doing it over here. This is why they're doing it over here. So we are in these silos, right? And so for us, it's by having a global movement that's not just relegated to your four corner borders, do you still create an environment in which you can go out, learn new information, bring it back, but you're also able to experience the world in a holistic manner, right? So like for today, you can wake up today and say, hey, I want to be in Brazil tomorrow, and you're there tomorrow. I want to say I want to be in Brazil tomorrow. I'm like, I got to wait 6 months. Yeah, right. Or the visa could get denied regardless. Right. Or the opportunity doesn't pass me. It doesn't even ever come back again. So for us, we don't believe that those rules apply to a 21st century world or even in 2023. How do we then rewrite those rules that allow us to stop navigating the world from the place of being outsiders, right? So, yeah.
So the actual specific Afropolitan effort still in phase 1.
Phase 1, yeah.
Maybe it's dabbling with phase 2.
Yes, we're already building out the products.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you just go into the actual specifics of like you're here in Zuzalu fighting the fight here? Who else is doing what elsewhere?
Yeah. So we are. I think we span 6 continents right now with the first 500 citizens. You have citizens who are in like entertainment, citizens who are in tech, founders who are in tech. So I can just give you name drop a couple of examples. One of the biggest festivals that bring the African diaspora together in Ghana, it's called Afrofuture, formerly known as Afrochella. They're based in Ghana, but the founders are citizens of Afropolitan, right? Some of the biggest YC-backed tech companies are Afropolitan citizens or Afropolitan investors. So you have companies like a Paystack that got acquired by Stripe for about 200 million. You have companies like a Flutterwave. Just the top African companies and even VCs are within the network, right? So I think the idea is just to say, look, we have literally brought together some of the best of our best in different verticals, and our goal is then to showcase that to the world, because it's not just even about the African diaspora. You have folks who are curious about Africa, but they don't know where to start, right? Like you might have been to Senegal, you might not have had a cultural guide, or you don't even know the best places to go to. Through Afropolitan, if you're part of the community, right, are we then able to curate that experience for you, whether it's you're looking to invest or you're looking to know what the best founders are or the best ideas are. We represent that because of the folks and the type of folks we have within our network. We can actually take you to the source, to the real sauce, not the stuff where you're like, yeah, this is not that good, but like this is dope. And because we've spent our time really attracting the best, that's what we have to offer across the board.
So Eche, there's at least a handful of Bankless listeners that have been inspired by this conversation, myself included.
Yeah.
How can they help? What kind of talent are you looking for?
Yeah.
Who are you looking for that can just help this movement?
Honestly, we need a lot of technical talent as well, right? We want to be able to compete from a technical perspective, because I do believe highly in being able to enshrine our freedom in code, right? And I think crypto allows us to do that, or just blockchain in general. We also want allies, and these allies can cut across, because it's all, again, about access. We got invited to Zuzalu just by Vitalik just reaching out and saying, hey, I want to invite you guys to this thing that we're doing with the Pop-Up City experiment. Just something that little, right? And it's more about you. If you have privilege and you have a key, can you borrow that key to someone else, right? And that's really what access is. And so sometimes people are like, hey, how can I help? I think like they have to go do the rocket ship for us. No, it's just thinking through access. How are you able to say, hey, I have access to this thing and I'm able to share this with you guys. Can you guys come use this, right? So we've gotten offered islands. We've gotten offered, I'm telling you, it's amazing. But we've gotten offered like so many different great opportunities, even like the whole New York Stock Exchange thing, right? It was a hedge fund that was like, hey, we have access to being able to close, do the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange, but we want to offer you the opportunity. And then the New York Stock Exchange embraced us as well. So again, it's thinking through access and what access looks like for us, but we are really just looking to attract the best of the best across the world, right? And this cuts across race, it cuts across religion. We could care less about where you are, where you've been. It's really about what you hope to become, right? And I think that ideology of abundance is so powerful for us, because it includes redemption, it includes, again, audacity, right? It includes an ability to win and help win, right? And then we want to be able to play long-term games with long-term people, right? So yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. And if people just want to learn more because they're compelled by and they want more education, or maybe they're still skeptical and they still need to be convinced, are there any more resources that they can
definitely.
go review?
If you go to afropolitan.io, Afropolitan spelled AFROPOLITAN.io, you will.
There'll be a link in the show notes.
Yes, thank you, Dave. I know I watch a lot of Bankless. No, but thank you so much for having me, man.
Of course, Eche.
Thank you.
Then there's a lot of crypto that I think everyone knows that crypto has done a deal with the devil, and we have things like Pepe Coin and all of these short-termer stuff that gamble. And then there's this story like this, which is the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And so it's a great articulation for why this crypto industry is here to actually change the map of the world in ways that it ought to have drawn in the first place.
Yeah.
So thank you for bearing the responsibility of this crazy movement. And we need people like you to actually apply crypto principles for better.
Yes.
Without that, then I would have much less of a passion for this industry.
Yes.
So thank you for providing that to me.
You know, I had a friend who once said crypto has always been about abundance, right? but for some reason, obviously, it's the short termers that have that tend to navigate the headlines a lot more. But I truly do believe that it is a way. I think I follow Punk 6529, and where he makes this argument about the freedom to transact it's a human right? And I think with crypto, if folks knew how much of the rest of the world were like systematically cut out from the global financial systems, it's why crypto is a need in Africa. It's not just a nice to have, right? And so I would encourage folks, if you want to come visit Africa to see for yourself, we can help arrange that. But I do believe that like why crypto exists is to help bring the rest of the world into this abundance, right? There's a lot of the world that's still in the darkness. And I think if folks, it might sound altruistic, but really you could also benefit from this too, because the more people who live in abundance, the more they have money to spend, and the more maybe an entire economy thrives, right? And I think I want more stories like this to be told, because I think during that whole period when we announced our application process, that was like the week FTX just collapsed, right? And you have a whole lot of skepticism of like, okay, NFCs, DAOs, crypto, I don't even want to hear it. But we received about 3,000 plus applications. And I think it was because people were tied to the mission and not just the technology, right? And so that allowed us to still be able to kick on and then attract the sort of people that we want into the community. So I'm here long-term for crypto, man. I'm here for the principles of crypto: transparency, accountability, immutability, and just also a no single point of failure. I think we're tired of that. Like, we're tired of living in that world.
Eche, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.